What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 4 of what I believe will now be called TheDomCast. First 3 episodes it was called The Dom Pod, and honestly, when I first posted, I did not have a name. Just kind of came up with it on the spot, and then somebody suggested TheDomCast, and I think that flows a lot better, so that is what I will go with, and I think it will stay that way, because obviously I don't want to be changing the name of this every few episodes. People get confused, and we are still very early on, so not a big deal to call it something different now. Anyways, we got some good questions today. If this is your first time tuning in, you gotta follow my Instagram, Dom_2K. Every week around Thursday or Friday, I end up putting out a post where I ask you guys to ask me questions that will end up on this show. Of course, it's all NBA related, and I'll kind of just talk for a while and give my thoughts on whatever it is you're asking. So for the first question, I can't believe I'm really answering this one, but I thought the subject was funny when I first saw it, so I will. G-Dub the Baller asks, how realistic is Charles Barkley's claim that the Blazers will make the finals? And oh my goodness, Charles Barkley claims. That could definitely be the name of like a segment, cause throughout my life, obviously, I've seen a lot of Charles Barkley on TNT, and he's always just had all this off the wall stuff to say. His predictions are not just wrong most of the time, but they just come out of left field, like this one, that the Blazers are going to the finals. Forgive me if it was a joke, because I saw the clip where he said it. I didn't see if he if he said he was kidding afterwards, but I'm sorry if you're a Blazer fan out there. Obviously that's not realistic. See, on one hand, the Blazers are better than people are giving them credit for this year. I think from the outside looking in, it might just look like Damian Lillard and CJ when it is not their way at all this year. So they're definitely pretty good, but I'm not taking them in a series over the Warriors, the Thunder, the Rockets. I'm just not. It would take multiple injuries for me to be able to see a scenario where they would realistically go to the finals. And the way that I think about the Blazers anyways is I just kind of see them as a team that's on the road to losing their star. And not because they're a terrible team or anything, but because they've kind of been caught in no man's land for a long time now. The furthest they've ever been is the second round of the playoffs. Damian Lillard is very outwardly spoken about his loyalty to that team and wanting to stay there, so if it's up to him, he's making it sound like he's gonna stay because he says there are things that are bigger than basketball, and I understand that. He's human too. He has other things that he loves. I get it. But I think eventually what might happen is it might be one of those KG situations where Garnett wasn't really so ready to leave Minnesota as the Wolves were just ready to move on and rebuild because they figured their time with him was up. So I think eventually, even if it takes longer than it takes for other stars, I think the Blazers are going to be headed down that road. Now, of course, things can obviously change. The Warriors might break up this year, the Blazers could get somebody, then all of a sudden they're running the West. They come out of nowhere like the Warriors did, right? That could happen. But if I had to put money on it, I see the Blazers, just like how the Raptors had to get rid of DeRozan because it was just time for them to part ways. I think eventually that will happen with Lillard and the Blazers, and they're definitely not going to the finals this year. I don't see a scenario, I don't see a realistic path to that happening. So that one's pretty short and sweet. Next question is from Cool Kid Poppy, and he asks, why do you think no major free agent wants to play with LeBron anymore? And I'm not even 100% sure that's true. We still have yet to get to the summer where we're going to have a huge free agency class, so I think this is one of those things we won't really even be able to have like realistic theories about until we see how that shakes out, because obviously if they don't get one major free agent this summer, then things start looking crazy. Then you might start looking at like, wow, why did nobody go to play with LeBron? But even in that situation, I won't think it's that, oh, they didn't want to play with LeBron, they were avoiding him. I think for most people, it would just be a career decision. For the first time ever this year, we saw Father Time catch on to LeBron. His defense had been steadily declining anyways, but we haven't really seen him knocked out for a whole month, like 18 games because of injury, and that happened, and I don't think he really fully healed from that. So now if you're a free agent, you're looking at it and saying, when is LeBron going to decline? I know that I'm going there to try to win the championship within the next 2 seasons because we don't know what he's going to do with that last year on his contract. So it will just be a thing that might be off-putting to certain free agents. Maybe they'll want to go somewhere where they feel more secure, where they don't have to sign and possibly end up alone or end up, with any kind of problem that you might have signing with a superstar that is going into a different phase of his career. I think many people would love to play with LeBron, but I think the situation just might not make sense. So this summer, if they don't really get anybody, I don't think that's an indictment on him as much as it is it's a situational thing. It's like LeBron is great, but if he's not around that much longer, why do I need to sign a long-term contract in LA just to end up in the same type of situation I might be trying to leave right now? So I think it more so would have to do with that. The 508 God asked a pretty unique question. He says, how much weight do you actually put into the NBA pre-1980? Or do you not count that era? Well, first of all, I'll just go ahead and knock that second part of the question off. There's no such thing as an era that I don't count. These guys were all pros. They were all the best in the world at some point, so I'm never gonna say, oh, I just didn't count that, so that's not a thing. But I am in the process of trying to separate eras and getting out of the habit of comparing, because especially where we saw this year with all the rule changes and how much that affected scoring and whatnot, it really just doesn't make sense to compare past a certain point. And even before this year, it hadn't made sense for a while. So if we're talking about this thing of like, well, how much weight? Well, first of all, I can only count them for what they did in their era. So for instance, we have Bill Russell, and he dominated his era, which it just was what it was, right? There were less teams, there were less rounds. He won 11 championships. He was a player coach for some of those championships. That carries weight no matter what. But I think what this question may be getting at is it's a different conversation when you start talking about crossing over eras, which it obviously doesn't make sense, because you can see in the footage that certain guys would have an issue playing today if you just took them from that footage and stuck them in today's league. So we've already went over this and heard it 100 times. If you're going to take a player from the 60s and put him into now, you got to assume he's going to have all the same advantages and he's going to train differently. So then a player like Bill Russell that was very high IQ and very high on the, or very active on the defensive end, you've got to assume with all the advantages, he'll still be elite today, right? With those advantages. But that's all hypothetical, right? We're never going to know. We're never going to see that. Therefore, whatever they accomplished in their era, they get credit for, period. Do I just think straight up a player from the 60s is as good as some of the guys today? No, probably not. Did the NBA have like a weak point in the 70s before we had Magic and Bird? Was it at a low point? Yeah, it was. But this whole conversation of past things and how players would perform today, I'm really just starting to see it as more of a fun what if type thing. Like I saw a really good point being brought up, because this week LeBron James passed Michael Jordan on the all-time scoring list, which of course it sparked a ton of debates. And I saw somebody bring up a great point that, you know what, in this era and as time passes, you're going to see more and more people saying that LeBron James is definitely greater than Michael Jordan, because a lot of people hadn't seen Michael Jordan play. People are coming into the league having watched LeBron and grown up watching him, so that's going to be their GOAT, and it's going to be hard for them to, accept that anybody was ever better than him. And it's going to be the same thing in another 25 years. Kids that are born later on and become later NBA fans, they're going to hear about LeBron James and all his accolades, but they're going to be seeing what's happening right in front of them in the current day, and it's going to be difficult for them to say that this guy from 20 years ago is better than the guy I'm watching right now. I get why that's hard. So as far as the weight question that this guy is asking, what guys accomplished in their era, it's simply what they accomplished. It's what they accomplished under the rule set that they were playing under. It's what they accomplished against the competition they were playing against. And if they were at the top back then they were at the top. It does not mean that they would be better than some of the best guys today. But I could never sit here and just say, oh, this guy's accomplishments doesn't count because of something that he couldn't control. Bill Russell couldn't control. He was playing in the 60s and in one of the earliest spots in the NBA. He can't control that. But because of all the changes through the years and everything, I'm obviously not going to then say, oh, his 11 rings make him the GOAT today. Everything he did back then makes him the GOAT today. I'm actually finding myself starting to align more with, I believe it was Kareem that said it. I can't remember what player said it or what media personality said it. But whoever said the thing of we really need to start looking at GOATs of eras, I'm really starting to feel that way. Because we're never going to see Michael Jordan and LeBron James on the court together. We're never going to see LeBron James on the court with the NBA or the face of the NBA like 20, 25 years from now. It's never going to happen. So there's just so many factors that this whole thing might just become easier if we just separate it into the eras, because at the end of the day, with how basketball changes over time, the way it's played and how it changes over time, it's going to get more and more difficult to definitively say one guy was better than the other from completely different eras. And so one of my biggest videos on my main channel is the Michael Jordan better than LeBron James video. Made that about a year ago. And I'm not taking anything I said back in that video because there was a lot of stuff that was backed up by evidence, but I think in the future you won't really see me making videos about players across eras like that and trying to have a definitive answer of who's better. I think that video had a lot of me really wanting to drive home a point of how much MJ had accomplished in a shorter time than LeBron. And that was an idea I really wanted to put out there because I felt like everyone was ignoring it when they were talking about that debate. But as far as that, maybe you'll see me do some case for GOATs. but I highly doubt you'll ever see me saying again that player A in the 2020s is definitively greater than player B in this era, because the more I look at the game's history, the more I learn, the more perspectives I see. Comparing across eras and trying to diminish these guys' accomplishments or prop up these guys' accomplishments, it's making less and less sense as time passes. So that's a really long and complicated answer to your question of what do I count or how do I weigh stuff before the 80s. Long story short, I hope a trend catches on where we start to compare by eras instead of comparing across eras, because it's becoming very difficult and it's not really getting anywhere. These arguments, honestly, they're not really getting anywhere. Same stuff is said every single year, it's recycled. I don't know, I'm gonna move on now. Jacob says, best highlight you have personally witnessed on TV or in person. Well, I've only been to like 3 NBA games in person. And besides from Dwight Howard's 50-point game, I believe, against the Hawks in the playoffs, I haven't seen like any historical plays in real life. But I have seen historical plays on TV, and although I've seen some great dunks, game winners, and all that good stuff, it would be very difficult for me to say I've seen anything more important or anything really better than LeBron James' block in the 2016 finals, just because of what that meant, the lead up to it, the outcome. Maybe there were like dunks that were more impressive or flashy passes that were cooler. I've seen a lot of cool stuff, but I would definitely have to say that was the best highlight I've seen, because it was just so impactful in so many different ways. However, Steph Curry's game-winning shot against the Oklahoma City Thunder back in 2016, where he pulled up from damn near half court, that's up there too, because that was like him being in the process of changing how basketball is played, because he was already hitting threes before that. But 2016 was that year where he started doing stuff we just never seen, chucking from the logo, pulling up off the dribble near the logo. That was like the process of him making or normalizing those shots. So I feel like that highlight in OKC kind of embodies what that season was about for him and its impact on basketball. So that's also that not only is it one of the best highlights I've seen, but that's also a very impactful highlight as well. That shot really tells a story, in my opinion. Next question says, what is Kobe Bryant's greatest achievement / biggest boost to his legacy? Kobe Bryant's legacy is always interesting to look into because it's so much different from LeBron's, whereas, you know, you have LeBron James with all these crazy moments. The signature game against the Celtics, signature final moments, like there's just so much to choose from. But with Kobe Bryant, he had 3 championships where they just completely steamrolled the opponent. And then the 2 times that he played the Celtics, there was never really like a signature moment, you know, like how you can look at like the LeBron block or his Game 7 jumper against the Spurs. Kobe didn't really have one of those. It just didn't happen that way for him. However, I would say his greatest achievement, it would have to be winning the 2010 NBA championship. That just has to be, because there's a section of fans that just don't see anything but stats, and they don't realize he was doing that season on a messed up knee. His finger was like broken in some place. He had to learn how to shoot differently for that season, so he had to change how he shot mid-season. And he still went on and played a huge part in them winning that championship. And that's definitely his biggest boost, because you have to look at, well, what would have been the opposite reaction, right? What happens if they lose the 2010 NBA Finals? That would have been devastating to his legacy, because they lost in 2008. They won in 2009 when the Celtics were hurt. So losing in 2010 to a Celtics team that people thought should have been there in 2009, that would have been a detractor from his 2009 championship. And like he said himself, people would say, you know, you lost to the Celtics twice. This is within the Lakers and Celtics rivalry. So there is a lot going on there where Kobe was really in a must-win situation. And if you don't believe that was a big boost to his legacy, just look at how people still talk about it and still try to take it away from him. The people that didn't actually watch that series, where they just look at stats, now they're going back and saying Pau Gasol was the best player in that run and he should have won Finals MVP. So can you imagine what would have happened if they lost that series? Yeah, that's a gigantic boost, the fact that they were able to find redemption there. And I think that's one of the few legacy moments as well. Because again, the other 3 championships that they won, they were just steamrolls, right? There wasn't a ton of adversity in those. But both series against the Celtics were very tough, very physical, and they meant a lot to both sides. So yeah, the 2010 NBA Finals, definitely Kobe Bryant's greatest achievement, I would say. Also, that was the biggest obstacle he had to overcome after Shaquille O'Neal. Colvin is asking, what was your favorite MVP race as well as your favorite Rookie of the Year race? My favorite MVP race would probably be 2017, and it's because I had so much fun covering that year. I believe I have a video from 2 years ago covering that called the most confusing MVP race in history, and because that year you had like LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Westbrook, Harden. There was so many players that could have been considered front runners, and it was just so fun on a nightly basis seeing what was going on there. And then that was at a time where triple doubles were still a very exciting thing to us, so the fact that Westbrook was chasing that record at the same time, it was just crazy, especially when you got to the last game where against the Nuggets he banked in that game winner. It seemed like somebody was writing a book. Seeing Westbrook and Harden go head to head, because I believe they ended up the front runners for MVP that year if I'm remembering correctly. And yeah, that was a ton of fun to cover. I'm glad I was around for that. I'm glad I had an audience for that. And my favorite Rookie of the Year race, to be honest, the only one I've ever really been invested in was Ben Simmons and Donovan Mitchell. I don't think I've really ever cared for Rookie of the Year race outside of that. And it's mainly because my head was just hurt from people, I was getting a headache from people trying to come up with the reason Ben Simmons shouldn't be Rookie of the Year is because he's not a rookie. And people, you know, they were mad that he sat out that year, the first year when he was supposed to be a rookie. So then he came back and people were like, no, it should be Mitchell. But to me, it clearly should have been Simmons the whole time. And the only argument was that he was drafted earlier, so he shouldn't have qualified. So, you know, then there was the whole pettiness going on of Donovan Mitchell having that sweater that said something about rookie, and I mean, it was funny. There was a lot of humor there, so that was the only one that really sticks out to me. It's the only one that I really cared about. And there was just a lot of humor in the whole thing. Like, people were standing so hard for Donovan Mitchell to win that, so I thoroughly enjoyed that year. Chris Dodds is asking, how good would Steve Nash be in today's fast-paced league? And I think I had a tweet about this not too long ago, maybe a couple of months ago. And this goes right back to what we were just discussing earlier in this video about comparing across eras. This is one of the reasons it doesn't make sense, because you have a two-time MVP, made multiple All-Star teams, was widely known as one of the best point guards of his era, and Steve Nash would probably be known as an even better point guard. He would probably rank even higher and have more accomplishments if he just played today instead of 10 years ago. Like, how crazy is it to imagine that a player that retired in the year 2014, which was not that long ago, would have been better if you just adjusted his career for how the game is played now. We're in 2019. And so what I mean by that is, you look at Steve Nash back in that era and his scoring is kind of modest compared to what he was actually capable of. He has a lot of these years where he's only averaging like 17 points, 14 points. The most he ever averaged was 18 points back in 06. So imagine he's playing in this era where he has the green light. They're saying, Steve, take the ball, shoot that bitch. So the most field goals he ever attempted in a season was 13, well actually 14. 14 attempts a game. That's his highest amount of attempts, and that was in 03 with Dallas. Steph Curry's highest attempted year was 20, and his lowest attempted year where he was actually on the court, because he has a year where he only took 11 shots a game, but he was hurt a lot of that year. In 2011, where he played 74 games, that was the lowest amount of shots he took at 14. Wrap your mind around that for 2 seconds. Steph Curry's lowest shot attempt total for a season is higher than Steve Nash's highest. That's so crazy. And so you stick Nash in an era where point guards being able to score is far more important now, and he has the vision he has too. You give him a green light like that and he probably has a lot more career success. His accolades look better, his stats look better. It's crazy that that came up in the same video. I really didn't even think about it, but that right there is what I was talking about earlier, where I said comparing across eras, that's why it gets hard. Because point guards from here on out, after the Steph Curry era, you already see how Trae Young has came into the league just letting it fly with the green light. This is a rookie with the green light to let it go from the logo sometimes. So guys like him and guys that come after him, they're all going to end up with better looking stats than Steve Nash most likely. And Nash would clearly have benefited from that same green light. So yeah, I wonder how many players are out there like that where... Let's even take it to Kobe for a second, because people always get on Kobe Bryant for his field goal percentage. What if Kobe Bryant is playing in an era with way more space than he had? What if his big man is not Andrew Bynum, who is going to be in the paint and going to be taking up some space? What if he's always standing on the perimeter? Vince Carter, Allen Iverson, the list just goes on for players that would, just from space alone, they would benefit from that. These ISO scorers, these guys who you couldn't check one-on-one. Yeah, man, that's crazy. Next up, Dion Blockton. That is a hilarious name. Dion Blockton asked, who's your favorite player in the NBA today? Yes, my favorite player in the NBA today is Kyrie Irving. Having Kyrie Irving go to the Celtics was just like perfect because I was always praising him when he was on Cleveland, talking about how fun he was to watch, his handles, the killer instinct he displayed. Like, I just loved it all, but he wasn't really my favorite player because he was the ops. He was in Cleveland. So when he came to Boston, that just made the whole thing really easy. Love getting to watch him, or having a reason to watch him play every night because he's on my team, so I'm going to naturally tune in more often. He participates in one of my favorite matchups, which is him versus Curry. It just makes life very easy. So will he still be my favorite when and if he leaves the Boston Celtics? Well, I'll tell you one thing, unless he just does some shady stuff, like if he leaves the Celtics and he's being a diva about it and talking down on them, and if the whole situation just becomes shady, then he's the ops now, right? Then I probably won't really mess with him anymore, but other than that, the man is a free agent, so if he leaves us and there's not a whole bunch of extra activity around it, then it just is what it is. He left. He has the right to do that. I'm not one of those fans that'll just hold it against him forever or start acting like I never really liked him that much. Like, see, it's a difference. You know, when Ray Allen left the Celtics, and I was a lot younger back then too, so it was very easy to be mad. But yeah, I was super hot about that because he didn't just leave us. He went to the Heat, and it was pretty much like the Kevin Durant move before Kevin Durant, so I really didn't like Ray for a little bit. But, you know, it's not like Kyrie could lose to the Warriors this year or lose to the Bucks or lose to the Raptors and end up going to those teams. I highly doubt any of that is in the cards. So, yeah, I will be on good terms with Kyrie Irving. Either way, that is my favorite player now and should be for the foreseeable future. And for our last question, and you know I get a Lakers question every single week, so I cannot just leave the Lakers off the podcast. They are what's relevant right now, or the situation is anyways. And Matt is asking, what would you propose that the Lakers do? Because we are now in the situation, it's like Doctor Strange, we're in the end game now. Yeah, the Lakers are kind of boxed in. They're not making the playoffs this year. Everybody's hurt. Kyle Kuzma, Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram. I highly doubt LeBron James was ever 100% after that groin injury. They are now 6 games out of the A spot, I think, so at this point, it would take like some unforeseen, somebody would really have to put their hand on the scale for the Lakers to make it. So they just announced yesterday, I believe, that they're going to put LeBron James on a minute restriction. And to me, this is just the first move on the board to what is really coming. I believe LeBron is going to end up missing like the last 10 games totally. Because LeBron James is a massive, massive short-term investment. Everything rides on him. After this season, he is signed officially for 2 more. Again, that last year, we don't know what is going to happen with that. So they've got to make something happen with him while he's here fairly quickly. At this point where your young guys aren't even playing because they're injured, if anything happens to LeBron now, freak accident, torn ACL, torn anything, they are screwed. Nobody will come there this summer. They won't win anything with LeBron James. Their core is not going to be able to take any major steps because you've got LeBron on the team. So you're not going to be able to make any major moves to help that core go on to what they should be trying to do for the next like 5 or 10 years. The Lakers have put themselves in a position where for the signing this summer of LeBron James to make sense, they've got to make everything of that situation that they can. So minutes restriction now, and I think if you're talking about what do I propose, at some point, I know it's a terrible look, but LeBron's got to sit at some point. I saw them on ESPN or whatever, Chauncey Billups and them were getting mad at Paul Pierce for saying it, but Paul Pierce was just saying, he was just laying out the smart game plan. Is it the noble one? No, of course not. You got fans that want to watch you, you're in the GOAT conversation. Yeah, it seems kind of sketch just because you're not going to win and go to the playoffs this year to just not do your job, not play basketball. But again, this is everything for the future that the Lakers chose. This is everything for them right now. So at some point, they got to pull the stunt and say that LeBron James' groin never fully healed. He's going to take time off and try to get it right and just let the clock expire. Try to get their odds up for a pick. Completely surrender this season and start getting your pitches together for a free agent this summer because it's like I always come back to this every week, but I can't stress enough how screwed the Lakers will be, the LeBron Lakers will be, if they don't get anybody significant this summer. I saw a report, which I don't know how valid it is, but that they're already planning to offer Jimmy Butler a bag, and to me, I don't think that's a great idea, but I think it shows the type of urgency that they need to have, because they gotta get somebody. There would be no point for a team with young guys on it to have LeBron James with them if he's just going there to retire, because that kind of holds them back. And I think if I'm the Lakers, realistically, I'm targeting DeMarcus Cousins this summer. I've already went through, I can't remember if it was in a podcast or a barbershop talk, but I already went through why most of these free agents seem like they kind of have a straightforward situation going on this summer. But we know that most likely DeMarcus Cousins will leave the Warriors. So obviously make pitches to everybody. There's nothing, you can't hurt anything by putting feelers out there for a Kevin Durant or a Klay Thompson or just anybody you can talk to. Do your due diligence. But plan for Cousins, that's my opinion. But then a lot of this question also depends on where do the Lakers land in the draft. They would literally, it would take a miracle of miracles for them to get the first pick right now and land Zion, because of course if something magical happens like that, then now they have all the leverage this summer. You got the #1 pick, you can go out there and you could trade for Anthony Davis now, but don't count on that happening. And like I said with the due diligence thing, plan for Cousins, but also do try hard to convince a Kevin Durant to come or a Kawhi Leonard, because even though I don't think those guys are going to go there, again, you have to realize the situation that you signed up for by committing these next 3 years to LeBron James. That's a win now situation. You have to start thinking though, very early on, you have to start thinking, okay, what happens after him though? Do we just miss the playoffs for another 5 to 6 years? Of course, the best thing that could possibly happen is you get one of these younger guys like a Kawhi Leonard to come to LA, so once your time with LeBron runs out, now you've already got your next guy to go to. That's pretty much San Antonio Spurs playbook 101. That's how they were able to stay relevant from David Robinson to Tim Duncan to Kawhi Leonard until Kawhi broke the path by asking for a trade. That was a curveball for the Spurs. They hadn't usually had those problems. So yeah, if you can safely transition from a championship team to the next phase of your franchise without having to tank and do all this disruptive stuff, that's always better. So this is a ultra important summer for them. If they can use LeBron to lure a young star there, because like I said, I don't think Anthony Davis is going to go there after being traded to a contending team next summer. I just don't see him leaving a contending team for the Lakers in the summer of 2020. Got to try to win now and have a young guy after LeBron so that signing makes sense. So that is going to be it for today. Remember, if you want your questions featured, to follow my Instagram, Dom_2K. Be on the lookout for my story where I put out the questions and you guys can leave one and hope that it gets on this show because I enjoy answering these. Hit the like button, comment, and sub if you enjoyed, and hit the bell next to the channel name if you want notifications when this comes out every Saturday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.